It's 11th of November 2023, everyone, and it's election day in Bayelsa, Imo, and Kogi states, where 5.1 million voters who have collected their PVCs will decide by the power of the ballot who the next governor will be in these states. Welcome to a live coverage of the election, where we'll be monitoring events on the field from start to finish. Our reporters are all across the states, and we'll be bringing us up to date with events as the events unfold today. We have our guests lined up, and they will also be joining us shortly on the show. INEC says all is set and that it has fine-tuned its process from the last election in February. The security agencies have also given their words, but in a few minutes' time will tell. I am Nifemi Oguntoye, and our correspondents in all of the 55 local government areas have also been up and doing, following this development very closely. Let's begin with the backstory to this election. The Kogi, Bayelsa, and Imo governorship elections are 3 out of the 9 off-season elections that are currently conducted in Nigeria. In Kogi, the off-season election resulted from a court decision invalidating the results of the 2007 governorship election and ordering that a fresh election be conducted on 29th March 2008. That's months after the inauguration of the governor at that time. The court decision changed the electoral cycle of the state, with a fresh election conducted outside the usual general electoral cycle for the general elections in the country. In Bayelsa, the court ruled for a fresh election to be conducted in 2008, invalidating the 2007 governorship election. The following governorship election in both states were held between November and December, and that's months after general elections in 2011, 2015, and 2019. All of these done to correspond with the constitutional requirement of governorship elections holding not earlier than 150 days, but not later than 30 days to the date of expiration of office of the incumbent governor. Now, let's talk about Imo State. When 2019, one of the states with off-cycle governorship elections also being added to the list, with a Supreme Court ruling in January 2022, months after the inauguration of the then governor. The Supreme Court's decision invalidated the outcome of the 2019 Imo governorship election, with a new winner declared. Today, we'll witness the first off-season governorship elections post the 2023 general elections, and the first off-cycle election to be held in Imo State. Imo has the highest numbers in this election, with 2,419,922 registered voters, out of which 2,419,922 have collected their PVCs. Some 101,000 PVCs remain uncollected in the southeastern state, and we're looking forward to see how many of those who have collected their PVCs will indeed turn out today, following the abysmal numbers we recorded earlier in February, where less than 25% of voters with PVCs came out for the presidential election. In Kogi, 1,932,654 are registered to vote in this election, out of which 1,833,160 have collected their PVCs. There are 99,494 uncollected PVCs in that part of the country. Bayelsa has 1,056,862 registered voters. 1,017,613, we understand, have collected their permanent voter cards, and only 39,000 plus PVCs haven't been collected in Bayelsa. Hopefully that speaks to the political awareness of the voters in this election, and we're all counting on an improved participation following the voter apathy we experienced earlier in the year. A quick update for you. A boat carried election personnel to registration area 17 in Koluama, that's in southern Ijo local government area, we understand capsized yesterday. Fortunately, no life was lost, as all the election personnel, numbering 12, as well as the boat operator, were rescued. INEC officials revealed in a statement that election result sheets, power banks, and luggage containing personal effects of staff have been lost to the sea. So the total number of registered voters in that affected area is 5,368, and the number of PVCs collected, we understand, is 5,311. INEC is also saying that it's making efforts to ensure that the election hold in the affected area. Another development from that part of the country is that INEC supervising presiding officer assigned to registration area 06, that's Osioma in Sagbama local government area, was abducted while waiting to board a boat at Amasoma Jetty. Security agencies, we understand, have been notified, and there is no update yet on rescue operations. Let's turn to Bayelsa State, where correspondent Sarah Ayeku is standing by. Sarah, it's 8 minutes past 7. Walk us through what the situation report is where you are.
Nifemi, of course, it's a slow start to this morning, election day here in Bayelsa State. And it's a bit foggy, hazy here in Goa. I'm in the state capital, where we're going to have majority of the votes come out when you take a look at the 8 local governments in Bayelsa State. And so a development story from last night is that a boat conveying election duty personnel capsized in Southern Ijaw local government, which is a local government that is not accessible to by road to a lot of people. You can't access Southern Ijaw local government. You can only do that by sea. And so this is not the first time we've seen a boat capsize and a boat conveying election officials, capsizing at that area. But what we see right now is that INEC has said that they will try as much as possible to ensure that the election materials that were lost at sea are replaced from the headquarters here in Yenagoa and taken down to Southern Ijaw local government. We're also expecting to see the police give us an update on the supervising presiding officer who was abducted yesterday while he was at the Amasoma Jetty. Earlier this morning, I had called the Commissioner of Police. He said that we'll get an update pretty soon as to what rescue operation has been put in place to ensure that this person is rescued from his so-called abductors. Another update is that we're hoping to also see 1 million, a little over 1 million voters come out to the 2,242 polling units here in Bayelsa State to elect the next governor of the state. It's a pretty tight race, especially for the contenders. I'm talking about the 2 major political parties here in Bayelsa State. It's a tight race, and fingers are crossed as to how INEC would fare in this election. Of course, they have something to prove going after the February election, as the presidential election and the senatorial elections that we had across the country. They also have something to prove, which is to gain the trust, from the Nigerian public as to how they would conduct this particular election. Also, the police, have something to prove. Just yesterday and a couple of days before today, we saw groups protesting and also asking for the removal of the Commissioner of Police, that's Tolani Alausa, here in Bayelsa State. And so we're hoping to see, and the police has said that this pre-election issues should not be a determinant or should not be a way to judge the police preparedness for this election. As you know, that 27,000 police officers have been deployed for this election, and that's aside the other paramilitary agencies that we're going to see at this election. So right now, we're not too far from the police command headquarters. If you see the road leading to the police command headquarters, you see the barricade and slight activity happening there. We've seen a barrage of police officers, go around the city, coming from this area to the other parts of the state capital, just to ensure that they kickstart their patrol on time before election starts at 8:30 a.m. And so we see people moving around, some trying to make the last trip to their polling units and ensure that they're settled for election and wait for INEC officials to resume at 8:30 a.m. So from what we've gathered from INEC, they've also told us that all of the materials are at the various rack centers. So we expect that by now at the rack centers, most of the materials will be out to the various polling units, and INEC officials will already be setting up there, if any.
Looks good from where you are, Sarah. It also feels like it might be cold, but with what the weather looks like this morning, we can see some police personnel driving just behind you. The curfew began at midnight, and according to the police, there will be restriction of movement till 6 p.m. Traveling to where you are this morning, walk us through what you were able to observe as regards these restrictions.
I think for a lot of people, you know, a day like this is just a day of rest. And we're hoping that we would not get the voter apathy that we saw in February presidential election today, because we're expecting to see that since it's the governorship election, people are enthusiastic. For now, Nifemi, people are decided. It's just a very slight percentage of people remain undecided as to who they will vote for this morning. And so a lot of persons I've spoken with a couple of days back, even before today, say they are decided. They made up their mind like before now to elect who they feel is the right person for them. That's the person that will steer the affairs of the state in the next 4 years. So they are decided voters. A lot of people here are decided. They know who they want to vote for out of the 16 candidates. And you know, the 16 candidates more are like brothers and sisters in the state, because you know that this is the Ijaw nation. The more, all of them are from the same extraction. So one of the messages, you know, from INEC is that these contenders should know, and particularly the youths who are the DIG in charge of this election had said that they are the vanguards of political violence, should know that apart from today, these contenders are brothers and sisters, and so there should not be a reason for violence. The fact that we have this huge number of persons vying for the governorship position shows that only one person can win, and so we're going to have 15 losers, sadly, for this election. So anybody that does not want to lose the election should not have been in the election in the first place. And so we're expecting to see that a lot of voters will come out, since this is their own governorship election, who they want to vote for, particularly show their support for their candidate.
I agree with you. Bayelsa can only have one governor at a time. I've spoken myself with some of the candidates who mentioned that they are ready to, you know, acknowledge or accept defeat as long as they have the persuasion that the process itself is credible. What is the timeline for the voting based on INEC's guideline? Accreditation is expected to start by 8 a.m., right?
So for here, accreditation will start by 8:30 a.m. Election starts 8:30 a.m. So you know that immediately you are accredited, you go vote almost simultaneously. And so what we're expected to see is that elections probably by end pretty soon, particularly for the local governments on land. But where the problem is the local governments which are across the water. We're talking Southern Ijaw, Brass, Nambi, and all the, particularly the flashpoints that the police had highlighted. 5 out of 8 local governments, Nifemi, the police said that these are flashpoints, although they're also focusing their security watch on the other 3 local governments. I'm talking these flashpoints, I'm talking Sagbama, Nimbe, Southern Ijaw, Brass, Kolokuma, Okokuma, and these are the local governments that they are actually watching closely. But a lot of persons have even said, from what I've gathered, you know, from the indigents here, they say that they are even scared to go to a place like Southern Ijaw, for instance, because of the violence they've heard in those places. Even some persons are being skeptical about going to a place like Brass, for instance, where one of the major contenders is from. So we're expecting to see that the police will, of course, up their game, given the number of personnel that they've deployed for this election. Security concerns, of course, election observers have raised security concerns as to these local governments, which are the local governments that usually delay a collation. Like in 2019, if you remember, in Southern Ijaw, for instance, there was a delay, you know, as to the collation of results. They had to bring it down here to, you know, go out to complete the collation of results. So we're expecting that when election starts 8:30 a.m., INEC will, of course, to have their national commissioners that will be going on patrol to ensure that the Beavers machine, which is a major issue, a major decider here in the election, will be working effectively, will function. They're also assuring residents in Bayelsa State that 8:30 elections would start, 2:30 elections would end, particularly for those who are on the queue. If you're on the queue before 2:30, you'll be allowed to vote, but if you're not on the queue before 2:30, you wouldn't be allowed to vote. So we're expecting that this process would last from 8:30 to 2:30 p.m. and we're also expecting, to see INEC officials make that statement as to how the collation would commence, because that's one major issue here in Bayelsa State. Collation of results is the biggest issue.
What are you hearing from INEC as regards its operation in that regard? Some resident electoral commissioners have talked about electronic collation, which sounds a little bit alien to what we're used to in the past. Are there any modification that you're hearing about, Sarah?
What we're going to see today is nothing. It's not really different from what we saw in the presidential election. So we're expecting to see that when you use the BVAS machine to confirm if you're a voter in a particular polling unit and to also ascertain the number of voters in that polling unit, you go ahead, you cast your vote, and then wait for the votes to be counted by 2:30 p.m. So we're expecting that even while the party agents would wait for the collation of results at the polling unit level, we're also expecting to see that this results now from the polling unit would be taken, as a picture will be taken and uploaded to IREV. Now, from what I gathered from the INEC Resident Electoral Commissioner, he had said that the IREV is not necessarily a collation tool. It's just to show that this was the result at this polling unit. And so the collation continues at the registration area, that's the RAP, and then the ward level, and then they bring it down to the state capital. So collation necessarily, we're hoping that would be faster this time around because of the innovation that the INEC had employed for the February elections. We're also expecting that while we await the results from these local governments, particularly those across the waters, we're expecting that the security situation there would also be monitored and it would not deter the outcome of this election. But another thing that election observers had raised is that they are hoping that persons with disability would be catered for in this election. But we got an assurance from the Resident Electoral Commissioner saying that that aspect of this election has been catered for, knowing that these voters are initially registered as persons with disability. That's at the point of registering, at the point of voter registration, they are already registered as persons with disability. And so we're not expecting to see aid equipment at all of the 2,242 polling units. We're expecting to see aid equipment for persons with disability only at polling units where you have persons with disability. So they have been able to identify these polling units, and that's where they will be able to cater to persons with disabilities. So for now, INEC, we're waiting for them to give us an update, of course, as to the issue that happened yesterday, which was how they would sort out the registration area in Southern Nigeria local government. We're also hoping to hear from them what would be different this time, how they would handle the peculiarities here in Bayelsa State.
You have spoken with the people, a cross-section of the people, since you got to Yenagoa. Just how excited are they about this election, and what's the confidence level like, particularly with the security challenges you highlighted earlier?
It's a very interesting state, particularly, Nifemi, if you take a look at the political history of the state and how most of them have been sworn to a certain political party, since the democratic rule. And so sometimes it's pretty interesting how some of them seems to be, should I say, die-hard fans for some of these political parties. Transcending political parties, some of them are die-hard fans of these individuals, that's these contenders in the race. They're die-hard fans, and so when you speak with them, they are decided, they know who they want to vote for. They are of course excited that today, they are actually going to be making history again today and deciding who will steer the affairs of the state in the next 4 years. So the people are excited. we're hoping that we would not get the voter apathy, because while I was at a dry clean, a laundry store yesterday, we saw some young people actually talk about today and how they're excited about voting. But then there were some sections of saying that they are not bothered about who eventually emerges governor of the state. But for the older generation now, you see that they know who they want to elect, who they want to vote for in this election. But the younger generation now are probably just concerned about some other things as to who will bring food to their table, who would sort out their school fees and all that stuff. What they're really concerned about is the economic situation of the country. As you know, that Bayelsa State has been identified as one of the multidimensionally poor states in Nigeria, despite the oil-rich status it occupies. And so what we're hoping to see is that based on the canvas nature of the civil society organizations, and based on what the education and INEC has given voters over months, in the last months, we're hoping that they will change their mind, and then come out and vote for the candidate of their choice.
Hold that thought, Sarah. I'll be back with you shortly. Let's also turn now to Owerri, where Abimbola Agbebiyi is standing by. Abimbola, what's the situation like where you are this morning?
Yes, Nifemi, good morning, Nifemi. Of course, the long-awaited, the much talked about off-season election is finally here in Imo State, and this is the mood in Owerri, the Imo State capital, this morning. There is calm. On our way down here, there's a heavy security presence. At every checkpoint, we had to identify ourselves, show our press tag. Of course, the Independent National Electoral Commission had told us that 44 national and 2 international media organizations were accredited for this exercise, of which 242 journalists are deployed, to the different parts of the state. Of course, on the part of the police, we have also been told that 25,565 personnel, have been deployed to the 27 local government areas in the state, and of course, 33 units of police force, are on the ground. Of course, that's a heavy security presence, according to the Deputy Inspector General of Police, Frank Uba, who have tried to assure residents of Imo State that this is not done to intimidate them, but of course to assure them of safety of the locations and environment where this exercise will be taking place. Of course, 18 political parties, like we know it, will be participating in this election this time, and of course 2,318,919 permanent voter card, that's representing 95.8% of registered voters have been collected. And of course, 4,720, polling units. Polling will be taking place in 4,720 polling units this morning, out of the 4,758 polling units. So we expect that, all that has been said, INEC had said that is ready for this poll. We expect that they will live up to expectations, this time around. Also, 135 international election observers, national observers and international observers have been accredited, to monitor this exercise. I want to believe that all of this is done to ensure that only accredited persons, are given access, have access to the polling units and, of course, the collation center this morning. Also, preferential treatment, or do I say special consideration, is being given to persons living with disability. There's a special device that is being kept for them, due to the situation. And, of course, that's to show you that INEC, INEC is ready, and they are saying that this is part of their commitment to ensure that it's inclusivity in this election. So we wait to see how things will play out as, we draw close to the scheduled time for this election. Nifemi.
Talk about the scheduled time. What's the timeline? What is INEC saying? When is accreditation and voting expected to begin where you are?
All right, of course, accreditation and voting is expected to begin at 8 a.m. We are yet to move to the polling units, and then, of course, we could see people coming out of their houses, moving to the various polling units. So we expect that what happened in the last election, which a lot of people have talked about, talking about arrival of election materials and all of that, will be checked this time around. I mean, INEC had gone all out to tell us that this time, of course, they said they have reviewed all the errors, recorded in the last election, and they have promised to improve on the processes and procedures of the election. So we expect that there will be some positive, improvement on the election this time around, as they have said. And we also expect that the security agencies, like they have tried to assure us, will live up to expectation in terms of ensuring that the lives of the people and, of course, election materials, are secure. At this election, Nifemi.
Trust me, Nigerians are counting on all of those promises. I can tell that people are also finding their way behind you. It's hard to tell if they are making their way to the polling units. But you talked about a heavy presence of security on your way to where you are. What has been the engagement like? What is their rule of engagement? Can you tell if they are allowing free passage of people this morning?
All right, so we have been to 3 locations where we were stopped, by the security officials, at those places. And I told you earlier that we had to identify ourselves by showing our press tag. Of course, some person who are also trying to move, they had to stop them to ask them questions. Where are you going to? And all of that. We observed that some buses who have no business being on the road were also stopped. Some had to turn back because they had passengers in them. I guess they have some place, they are going to. They have some had to turn back, citing, security officials ahead of them. So we do hope that things will go smoothly as they have promised us this time. Of course, we wait to see how things pan out, as we draw close to the election time. Nifemi.
Abimbola live for us in Owerri. Sarah is live in Yenagoa.